Here's a quick question. Have you noticed how prices keep going up? Take a cup of coffee for example. Back in the year 2000, it costed around $1. And today, in 2026, that same cup of coffee could cost you nearly $5. And it's not just coffee. A gallon of gas back in 2000 was around $1.50. Filling up your tank now could cost you more than $4 per gallon. So what's really going on here? Why do prices keep increasing instead of staying the same? Are sellers just rising prices together on purpose? Actually, there's one major reason for this, and the reason is inflation. It's a word you've probably heard many times, but do you really know what it means? Why does inflation happen in the first place? And is it always a bad thing? In this video, we'll break down exactly what inflation is and how it works. Inflation is actually pretty simple. It's when prices of things go up over time, which also makes the value of money go down. That's why things like a burger or anything else you buy or own cost more now than they did a few years ago. When inflation happens, your money cannot buy as much as it used to. For example, but now using a different analogy, back in the 1970s, the average price of a burger was only around 50 cents. But now, in 2026, if you try to buy a burger with those same 50 cents, you'll probably just get an empty bun with nothing inside it. And that's inflation. It's what makes everything else seem more expensive over time. But why does this happen? Well, that's what we'll talk about next. Inflation can happen for different reasons, but let's look at the four most common ones. The first is demand pull inflation. This happens when a lot of people want to buy something, but there isn't enough of it to go around. Take corn as an example. Normally, people want 10 tons of corn, and farmers produce exactly 10 tons, so everything works out fine. But then, a tornado destroys most of the crops, leaving only 3 tons available. Demand stayed the same, but now there's far less corn to share, and people start competing to buy what's left, and the prices rise. A can of corn that used to cost $2 might now cost $3, simply because everyone is fighting over a limited supply. The second is cost push inflation. This happens when prices rise because it costs more to actually make things. Imagine a popcorn seller who normally sells popcorn for $3, made up of $1 for the corn, $1 for other costs, and $1 for profit. But after the same tornado wipes out the corn crops, the cost of corn doubles to $2. And now, if the seller keeps his price at $3, he makes no profit at all. So he raises it to $4 just to protect that $1 profit. This is called cost push inflation, where rising production costs push retail prices higher. In this example, the rising production cost is the increased price of the corn. The third is the built-in inflation. This happens when rising prices push up the cost of living, so workers ask for higher wages to keep up. Let's say a shoe company's worker spends $900 a month on living expenses and earns $1,000, leaving a bit to spare. But if living cost climbs to $1,000, they would have nothing left over, so they ask for a raise. If the company raised wages to $1,200, the workers benefit, but the company's costs also go up as well, so it raised shoe prices to protect its profits. Higher costs lead to higher wages, which lead to higher prices again, and the cycle continues. The fourth is simply too much money circulating in the economy. Imagine a loaf of bread costs $5, and 5 people each have $5. With 5 loaves available, everyone buys one and it works out perfectly. But if the government gives everyone an extra $5, each person now has $10 and wants 2 loaves of bread instead of 1. However, there's still only 5 loaves of bread, so the bakery raised the prices now to $10, since everyone are clearly willing to pay $10 for it. The bread isn't actually more valuable, there's just more money chasing the same amount of goods, which is really just demand pull inflation in another form. So those are the main forces behind inflation. Now you might be wondering, how do we actually measure how high inflation is? That's exactly what we'll cover next. You've probably heard people talk about the inflation rate, something government mention often. Inflation gets too high, it can hurt the economy. But how's this rate actually measured? The most common method used is the Consumer Price Index, or the CPI for short, which tracks how prices of everyday goods and services change over time. For example, say in 2024, a loaf of bread cost $3, milk cost $4, eggs cost $5, a candle cost $8, and a movie ticket cost $10, which totals to $30. In 2025, bread now rises to $3.30, milk to $4.20, eggs to $5.30, and the candle to $8.10. Or the movie ticket stays at $10, bringing the new total to $30.90. That's a roughly 3% increase. So the CPI for that year will be 3% increase. In reality, CPI calculations are far more complex and includes many more items, but this gives you the basic idea. Here's the catch though, a low CPI doesn't always mean prices are rising slowly for everyone. In our example, essential items rose the most. Bread by 10%, milk by 5%, and eggs by 6%. Meanwhile, less essential items barely moved at all. Candles rose only by 1.25%, and movie tickets didn't increase at all. So even when the overall CPI looks small, people can still feel like everything is getting more expensive, because the things they actually need are the ones climbing the fastest. The CPI is really just a rough average, not a precise picture of the cost people deal with every single day. If inflation makes everything more expensive and lowers the value of money, shouldn't we aim for 0% inflation then? Or even negative inflation, to make everything cheaper? That might seem logical, but in the long run, it's actually not healthy for the economy. And here's the reason why. First of all, small inflation is good for growth. Central banks usually aim for 2 to 3% inflation each year. It's basically the magic number. You might ask why. It's because small inflation encourages people to spend rather than just to save. If people know prices will rise slowly over time, they're more likely to buy now instead of waiting to buy in the future. So when people spend, businesses grow, jobs are created, and the economy stays strong. Imagine trying to sell ice cream that nobody wants to buy, and that's bad for businesses. Secondly, negative inflation is dangerous. When the inflation rate drops below 0%, prices actually fall, and that's called deflation. While cheaper prices might sound appealing, deflation often forces companies to cut wages just to maintain profits. This creates a cycle where everything is cheaper, but no one has enough money to buy anything anyway. The Great Depression in the 1930s in the United States of America was driven by exactly this kind of massive deflation, making it one of the worst economic disasters in history. Third, the extreme end of inflation, called hyperinflation, is a nightmare. If small inflation fuels growth and negative inflation causes collapse, then runaway inflation is dangerous as well. Hyperinflation happens when prices rise by more than 50% a month. Imagine bread costs $3 in January, then $4.50 by February. If that pace continues for a year, the same loaf of bread could cost $389 by the end of the year. Venezuela lived through this firsthand, with excessive money printing causing prices to change almost hourly, leaving the currency so worthless that people literally threw it away. So in conclusion, inflation is actually a natural part of the economy, driven by various factors, from unexpected events to government or central bank policies, to even the theory that big companies could raise prices simply to boost their profits. Since we can't avoid inflation, understanding how it works and learning how to protect yourself from it through smart investments and staying aware of how your money grows can help you stay ahead.